Well, welcome to another episode of Rich Politics. Man, I love that music at the start. It really gets me going. I feel so pumped, especially with my guest today. She's a young conservative and a conservative candidate, someone who I met in 2019 in a very cold place called Abertillery in the Valleys. Her and her sister came to help me campaign during the Brexit campaign. And of course, as I stood as a candidate, as some of you will know. Well, welcome to the broadcast anyway. But before I introduce my guest, don't forget to follow us on all the social media platforms. There's YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, we're all over it. So make sure you give us a follow. I'd really, really appreciate it. Well, my guest is more important than me today, and she's far better looking than me, and she's got a lot more important things to say. So please would you welcome Alice Grant. Alice, welcome to Rich Politics.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard.
I've been dying to get you on. I know lockdown have had us all, tucked up in our houses with not much to do apart from sipping Chardonnay or whatever it is your tipple is. I'm so pleased to have you on and so much to catch up on. But there's a couple of things I just want to show you something on our viewers as well. Do you remember this? That was us campaigning in Abertillery, if you remember. It was really cold, and you and your beautiful sister came down and you helped with the campaign. We were knocking doors, and I think you fell in love with the Welsh, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I have such great memories from that time, and Wales is like the highlight for me of the whole Brexit party campaigning. It really was such fantastic memories.
Well, so much has changed, Alice, since 2019. We had the elections, of course, and Boris won a majority. But I don't know about you, but lockdown then kicked in as soon as he got his majority, and it seemed to change everything for everybody. We're all getting ready for the elections, which we are this year in May, if they don't get postponed. You're in Wales and across the UK. But of course, things took a turn for worse. We ended up with this pandemic out of nowhere, or some might call it China virus, and we found ourselves in lockdown, and with our civil liberties being taken away, and being locked up in our houses. But I just want to take you down memory lane, if I can. Okay, because I remember, and you might remember this, and I'm going to ask you your thoughts after we've watched this. Well, Alice, I don't know about you, but that gives me goosebumps. I don't know about you, but what did Brexit mean to you?
Wow. Well, Brexit for me was fundamentally really about just fairness and democracy. And I think that is something that resonates with the British people, obviously, because we don't particularly like having our laws being made miles away in Brussels by bureaucrats who are unaccountable and unelected and who mean nothing to us. And we've always been about what is fair and what is just and what is right. And that is our democracy and our laws being made here in Britain by British people who can serve our interests. And I think that is what really motivated me when it came to the whole Brexit thing. It was just the fact that I believe that that laws being made at a national level is the best way to serve a nation and its people. And it means a lot to me, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say, Alice, I think what we're seeing now, or what we're going to see, the probability of a real exodus of other member states from the EU. It's been reported quite widely. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think it would be a wonderful thing. I was just thinking today how sometimes there's this kind of odd view within Brexiteers who think that the EU is fine as a project, but actually it's just Britain who isn't suited to it. But I actually do really believe that the EU has not served the interests of the European people across the continent, which is why we're seeing such a resurgence of populism around the European nation states, because they too, the Italian people care about being in control of their country's future, not being decided by EU bureaucrats. The people of France care, the French care. I mean, all across Europe, the Hungarians, the Polish. I think we'll definitely see more, exits from the European Union.
Yeah, I think the UK has been a flag bearer for that, hasn't it? Certainly, and in the footage there we saw, Mr. Nigel Farage, who's been the champion of Brexit, who we love dearly. I still class him as a friend. Of course, I'm no longer part of the new party, which we'll come to a bit later, called Reform. But I have so much admiration and respect for the man, for what he fought for. And that night, I remember it because my birthday's on the 1st of February, so the 31st of January, of course. I remember being in a hotel in Cardiff. We couldn't make it to London, and celebrating. And it was just fantastic. The feeling of all those years of having to fight for what we voted for years previously.
Yeah.
The vote that had been denied by politicians down in Westminster and across the country because they didn't want to accept, they didn't want to consent to the fact that they'd lost this democratic vote. And it was just as if we were justified in all of that campaigning. Did you feel the same, Alice?
Yeah, what a night it was. It was so fantastic. And to see all these British flags, such a feeling of love and patriotism for our nation, and also for democracy. It was such a huge win after, as you said, so many years fighting for this vote, which the Remainers and the elites were trying to overturn. It was a fantastic moment.
It was a moment I will never forget. And of course, things have changed now. Boris obviously has won a majority. I remember the election night itself as well. Just going over a little bit of history here. I remember going to the count night in a place called Ebbw right in the heart of the Welsh Valleys. And I came second to the Labour Party. They've been, it's a strong Labour seat here in the valleys. I beat the Conservatives, which I thought, for someone who's never been a politician, never been into politics, I did pretty darn well, to say the least. But I remember the night. In fact, we're going to watch this now, and I just want to get some reflections and reactions from you after this video. So check this out.
Results are still coming in, and we're still only dealing with projections. But at this stage, it does look as though this One Nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate to get Brexit done.
I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward.
I can't help but be delighted by the performance of my party this evening.
Tonight we have seen that it is likely that Boris Johnson is on course to get a majority, and it is clearly a good night for the SNP. Some will be celebrating the wave of nationalism that is sweeping on both sides of the border. But let me say now, for millions of people in our country, these results will bring dread and dismay, and people are looking for hope.
This is a very bad night for the climate. It's a very bad night, I think, for progressive politics. We have to learn the lessons.
But I killed the Liberal Democrats and I've hurt the Labour Party.
But that wasn't your purpose.
My purpose, was to try to get the right kind of Brexit. If we get half a loaf out of it,
well, Alice, we certainly did get half a loaf out of it, because Brexit finally did get done, in the words of the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson himself. I just wonder, what did you think? Once Boris got that majority, and of course the Brexit Party played a huge part in that, I wonder what you thought and some of your reactions to some of the opposition leaders back then. For example, Jeremy Corbyn, who's no longer party leader anymore, and Jo Swinson, who thought she'd be the next Prime Minister. So I did have a little giggle when I saw that. What are your thoughts? Come on, tell our audience, tell us.
Well, I was at the count as well. I didn't do an all-nighter. I was going to, but I've been so tired from all this campaigning and stuff. I just fell asleep. But I remember when the results came in, I remember feeling, first I was quite obviously a little disappointed that we didn't win any seats, the Brexit Party, because I really felt like this was a movement which could have grown into something so much more, into actually making that difference in Parliament. But obviously I was overjoyed because I felt so much kind of love for my fellow countrymen who I knew in my heart had always wanted Brexit to happen, and who loved this country and who cared about our values and our traditions and our heritage. And I think the election of Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party really just proved that after all this time, after being belittled, after being patronised, after being told that we didn't know what we were voting for, and after being made to feel small-minded for actually just wanting this country to flourish and for loving this flag. Well, I guess we all proved them wrong that night, and we made our voices heard, and I think that's something to be so proud of for a long time to come. So.
It felt like there was a real boost in the nation, didn't it? It was like an injection of adrenaline up the political arm. It was like, yes, we've done it. And of course, that kind of enthusiasm waned quite a bit. I heard Ben Habib on a couple of weeks ago. He's due back on next week, actually, to talk about the Brexit deal, because a lot of our Brexiteer friends were not happy with the deal. Yeah. Of course, there were 186 coastal communities that didn't have the deal that they would hope for. The automotive industry did well out of it, but of course, our fishing communities felt left behind. And I know June Mummery and a number of our friends were are still passionate about that and about this level playing field. I wonder, what do you actually make of the deal yourself, Alice, as someone who believed in getting Brexit done and supporting Boris Johnson?
Well, honestly, I was never really going to be happy with a deal that was rushed through literally the day before Christmas, when it would be kind of just, they kind of just expected us, because we would be so joyful on Christmas Day, that we would kind of just ignore the deal. It really isn't good enough, firstly. And I think when I really understood that was actually listening to June Mummery on Unlocked, and she was almost in tears, I think, about the way that our fishing communities had been treated. And that, it really, really got to me, because obviously that's something I cared about a lot. Whilst I was campaigning, I went to many different coastal towns, to Hastings, to Eastbourne, and I was there. Actually, I spoke with fishermen, and they were, of course, all Brexiteers. And everyone was really excited about the opportunity of finally being able to rebuild our coastal communities, of being able to banish plundering EU vessels from our seas. For good. And I think there was a feeling of hope that actually we can change things. We voted to change things, and our voices will be heard by our politicians. And this deal just doesn't deliver that at all. In fact, it's almost worse, really, than the situation we have now, because it's utter humiliation. The fact that for 5 years we still have, we have to let EU vessels fish in our seas, and then afterwards we have to pay them compensation if there's any changes to the arrangements. It's just, it's really disappointing.
I don't know if I'm right in assuming this, but I get the feeling that some Brexiteers are satisfied and happy. I think Nigel's words were, the fight is over. The battle for Brexit is won. But I think there was still a lot to be fought for. And I think what we've seen is, whilst we're taking back sovereignty of our money, our laws and our borders, in relation to coming out of the single market and the customs union and tariff-free and quota-free, on trade. I think Liz Truss has done an amazing job with over 62, whatever it is, trade deals in the amount of trillions of pounds worth of investment, which I got a lot of respect for that woman. I think she's done a sterling job, and I think she'd make a good prime minister one day. You heard it here first. But anyway, I do feel that there's a lot left to fight for, but don't you think that that's now up to our Parliament, our elected MPs, to continue the debate and the argument over fishing rights and other things within the deal on our service industry as well that people aren't happy with?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, about 187, I think, coastal MPs, and I hope that they can apply pressure on this government to change things, because obviously, in terms of the fishing agreement, this deal does far from actually respect our mandate for sovereignty over our waters. These are territorial waters, and it's only right that we are the ones in control of them. And, we voted against the whole idea of a common fisheries policy, which is essentially almost what we've got ourselves back into again. I mean, it's not ideal. So I do hope it will be applied. But as you said, I think this fight for Brexit is something that's actually not over yet. I think, it will take many years, really, I think, of battling and for fighting for this, for it to be fully implemented so we can see all the great opportunities and the possibilities of what Brexit can deliver. So.
Yeah, I certainly think, speaking to Ben Habib and the guys at Unlocked, friends of mine, friends of the show as well, they're very keen to keep that fight alive. I always say Ben for number 10 because I just love him to bits. He's a great... I got a lot of time to respect, and he'll be on next week as well. But, just looking at the Conservative Party now, because we'll move on from Brexit, looking at what has happened to them, of course, with this big majority and Boris Johnson being this libertarian that he is, and into freedom of speech and freedom of people to do what they want to a certain extent, of course, all this kind of wonderful rhetoric that surrounds him. And he finds himself now leading a government that is handling probably the biggest pandemic, well, ever in my lifetime, certainly, the UK has ever faced. Do you think throughout this, Boris has lost his conservative mojo?
That's interesting, because he always kind of classified himself as a neoliberal sort of conservative. I mean, he clearly is. And in my honest opinion, I don't think that those two ideologies are compatible at all. You cannot be a liberal and also conservative because the two ideologies are inherently opposed to each other. Conservative on one hand is actually protecting and preserving our traditions, our values, the family, our Christianity of this nation. And on the other hand, the liberal idea has brought actually so much distress and so much, I guess, depravity and degradation of our society. I mean, it's honest. I don't see how you can be a liberal conservative, and I think that's really kind of a problem. Obviously, I do admire Boris, and I'm glad that he was able to get Brexit done, as he said, in a way, and also obviously he's under a really hard job right now with a lot of pressure with this whole coronavirus. But I think that I know many people who really, really supported Boris in the election, who were totally, pro Boris, and he's the man, and they feel really disappointed right now. And I do understand why, because we elected someone to kind of fight for our freedoms, and all we've been seeing is this prolonged lockdown. Obviously, the clampdown on our civil liberties and our being able to just do the basic things, seeing family and friends, and that's something that I think a lot of the British public are really upset about, and I understand that.
Yeah. I mean, you one of the things you mentioned there, talking about, of course, it goes against Boris's conscience to all these lockdowns, according to him, being a libertarian in his own mind. But those two things not going to get conservative and liberal. I can appreciate that because there's an old politician here in Wales. He was a Labour man called Roy Jenkins. Roy Jenkins was the one who introduced something called a permissive society, which was really, he was one of the founding fathers of the liberal movement, the liberal parties, really, in many respects, because the idea was that anything was permissible, and so the conservative idea, things weren't, you by tradition, as you say, you were married and you grew up with Christian morals and standards, and, it was a conservative idea of life. Of course, that's changed over the years for a whole number of reasons, and I'd face huge criticism if I was to call people to go back to what they would consider draconian days when we were living under all kinds of rulers. But suffice to say, our nation prospered as a conservative country, and I am not ashamed of capitalism. I make no, I come from a background, as you know, Alice. I wasn't brought up in a wealthy family, in a well-educated family, working class. I was touched by drugs. My brother died of drugs. I went through life, and I hated politicians. But when I began to turn my life around, realized you've got to work hard in life to get somewhere, to earn some money, to get some respect, to achieve things, to reach your goals. And then they call it capitalism. Well, I call it getting through life and making something of your life and helping others at the same time. And I just find it extraordinary people would have that. Going back to Boris, because I'm going off on a rabbit trail now. Going back to Boris, of course, lots of people, as you've said, have lost trust in Boris Johnson currently. I think a lot of that is down to some of these lockdowns, of course, and the harshness of them, as we've seen here in Wales as well. I wonder, is the Conservative Party losing its support base post-Brexit?
Well, I definitely wonder what on earth Boris thinks that all this is going to play out with his voters. Because from what I can see, I mean, if they truly cared about voters and about making sure that the British people are living good lives with their livelihoods and their jobs in order and their families cared for, then this is not the way to go. Because the whole lockdown to me seems very unfeasible and unsustainable for the future. We cannot continue to shut down our local businesses, our small businesses at random and at will, and our pubs. And this has had such an immense effect on the economy. And I just think this is a totally out of proportion reaction or response to coronavirus. Obviously, this is a bad virus. I know people who've had it. My uncle had coronavirus, sadly, and he was in bed for I think 2 weeks, and he was really ill. But ultimately, we cannot just stop our lives, stop living, in order to try to, I guess, contain the virus, because it doesn't work that way anyway. Herd immunity will be achieved, but it means actually we do have to go outside and we have to mingle with people, and kids need to go to school. And this has had so many bad effects, I think, on education. My sister's in her last year of her A-levels, and her exams have been cancelled, and she's finding that really difficult. And many people, my A-levels are cancelled. So
it is. I mean, I'm homeschooling 3 of my kids at the minute. And they're all in different years, and they're all on 3 different devices. And we're on day 4, and I'm ready to give up already. I've had enough. I'm like, open the blooming schools, will you? Get the teachers vaccinated and get them back to school, man. It's been a challenge, as it is for a lot of other people. I appreciate that. And of course, my opinion, and I've said it on our broadcast here many, many times for our viewers and listeners to know, I don't believe lockdowns work. I think that the cure cannot be, worse than the disease. And unfortunately, many people are not going to recover, not just from their business side, but the mental health impact that it's having on a lot of people. I had a friend contact me earlier this week and say, look, Rich, I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do. He's been furloughed from work, so he's not worried about finances, but he's got no family. He's got one person in his bubble. He's really struggling, and I'm just there speaking to him on the phone. And I wonder, he's just one person I've spoken to. How many people are out there suffering right now? And they just need, some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. But the problem is this, Alice. I've noticed this week there's a new strain now they're talking about coming out of Brazil. They're talking about the vaccine might only last for 5 months. Already, it seems the government are preparing us for what they said would become, we'd get out of this thing through the vaccine. It's our way out. But it's as if they're conditioning people to think now, well, we might not get out of it even after the vaccine.
Yeah, I think the role the media is playing in actually conditioning the public to already start accepting. At first, it was just a second lockdown. Then it was a third lockdown. Now it's, you have to be revaccinated every 3 weeks. Okay, that's an exaggeration. But, every 5 months or whatever. Then we're going to need internal passports for those who have been vaccinated and thus can enjoy normal life. And if you haven't, then, you're going to be under house arrest for the rest of your life or whatever. I think the point is that, there's definitely this climate of fear being generated by all this propaganda. And it's obviously really hugely damaging. And I think not only in terms of the future, but also, as you said, about the mental health crisis, really, which is going on. The media has a huge role to play in that kind of fear-mongering. And obviously not seeing family and friends must be so hard. My heart really goes out to people who are in that situation and to your friend. November was actually quite a hard month for me. I didn't think that usually I'm not bothered like too much by I guess, things, but actually lockdown really did get to me in November because the churches were closed. And that for me was really difficult because I really needed that element of my spiritual health and my mental health. Going to church has done so much for me. So when the churches were closed in November, that was really tough. And I can imagine so many people around the country feel that way. And obviously, I hope that we never are in that position again. Because obviously the casualties of the COVID lockdown, people who are committing suicide, young people who think that there's nothing worth living for anymore, other diseases which aren't being treated in our hospitals. These are real casualties and effects of the lockdown, and they are not being taken into account clearly, because otherwise this policy would have been dropped a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alice, look, I want to just ask you a couple of things before we go, because the broadcast is almost up, which is really good because it goes really quick. I know we'll talk more another time. I obviously, with what we talked about the Conservative Party and all these lockdowns, and Boris is losing favour with a lot of his support base, it seems currently. I'm speaking to somebody this week, or last week it might have been on the show actually, and we talked about maybe there's a gap now ahead, 4 years time, 2024, if the elections come up. There are gaps now appearing because it appears that Labour are not a credible opposition right now. Keir Starmer, for all of his wonderful rhetoric, he doesn't appear to be a good leader when it comes to opposition. They talk about new leadership, but he's capped in hindsight, right, as we know. I wonder if there's a gap now, as we've seen the rise of Lawrence Fox with his party, Reclaim, and then you've got, of course, the Brexit Party is now changed to the Reform Party. I wonder if there is a platform and a place now, a gap, if you like, where I think it was Ben Habib who I talked about this, and he felt the same. There's an opportunity for someone to rise up and stand up and to bring some balanced, common sense politics to our nation again that would reach the masses. No, not just in a populist sense, but in a way that says, this is wrong, we need to do this, let's get this sorted. Do you think there's a place for a political party right now to do that?
Well, I think if things continue as the way they're going, definitely. And I say this as a Conservative member and voter, well, now, and obviously a patriot. And this to me seems like an untenable situation in the long term, because obviously people want their lives back, people want their livelihoods, people want to see their family again, people want to be able to go to work and just enjoy the things that everyone should enjoy in a free society. So I think that I definitely agree that pressure groups could be really helpful in trying to form policy to return to what the voters want, which is freedom and Conservative values. So perhaps, I think,
Yeah. Well, you'll be hoping that Boris wins back his support base then, because for our viewers that don't know this, but you're standing as a prospective candidate, aren't you, up in the northeast? And you tell us a little bit of how that came about, because you've gone from the Brexit Party because you supported Brexit, of course, and we know the Conservative government at the time didn't, especially Theresa May. She was a disaster, but anyway, she's gone now. What are your plans now then, Alice? What's next for Alice Grant?
Well, so I'll be standing for election, hopefully. I think the elections, as you said, actually might be delayed. So we shall see, because I am actually going to university in October, which is crazy. I was accepted into Oxford, which is...
Oh, you didn't. You kept that quiet. I spoke to you before the show and you never told me you were accepted to Oxford. Now I can say I know someone who goes to Oxford now, ladies and gentlemen. Very nice. Very, very nice.
I really am. I'm
that's amazing news. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really pleased about that. I can't believe it. Hopefully I'll be able to do my work there.
Yeah, well, hopefully you do, and if you do, I can come and visit, and I can say I can tell people then I've been to Oxford University.
Yeah. That'd be amazing. Yeah, so that's happening in October, which I'm really excited about. But obviously, these elections are supposed to happen in May, and that was the plan. So we'll see how it goes. But otherwise, I'm very happy just to keep being involved in politics, obviously, because it's something that means a lot to me. Yeah.
Well, you should, because your young effervescent self has always been engaging in politics, and your sister as well, Beatrice, who I got to know as well. And please send her my regards. And to all of our viewers, look, you can check Alice out. She's on social media. Twitter things just come up on the screen there. Give her a follow and send her some encouragement, and we'll forgive her for being accepted into Oxford on this occasion. But Alice, listen, it's been wonderful having you on. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And to all of our viewers and guests, don't forget to follow us on social media, on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. And hopefully I'll catch you all next week on Rich Politics. Alice, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll speak again soon.
Bye.